Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining today's out-of-home office hours. Oops, sorry about that. Just again, sorry. Thank you for joining today's out-of-home office hours. I'm Scott Piachetti, head of operations here at Geopath, and just want to thank you for joining this, our second in our series of data talks, where we talk about all things data related, so the who, what, and where of data. Today's webinar, as you probably know, is going to be making the case for out-of-home and media plans. So, as I travel around the country meeting with our members, I know that this is always an important topic. And we thought it would be really great and important to make sure all of our members have those key talking points to help make the case for out-of-home when they're dealing with clients who may be having a multi-channel media plan. And so we know that's critical. And to help us with that, today we are honored and excited to have a couple of our partners from the ARF, so EVP of Research and Innovation, Horst Stipp from the ARF, and Kelly Flynn, Director of New Business and Development and Growth. And so we're excited to have them here with us today. And Horst is going to present some research findings from a recent study that the ARF conducted on how advertising works, so some research on that, but then also offer some insights and tips and tricks on optimizing out-of-home's impact. But before that, Kelly's going to offer a few insights and just give us a better understanding of the ARF overall and its mission. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Kelly, but I do want to say, which I always forget to do, sorry. If you have questions, please ask us questions. We're happy to take them. We're going to save that, though, until the end of the session. So we'll do a Q&A session at the very end. But definitely keep, as you think of your questions, keep posting them in the question widget as we go along. But again, without further ado, I'll hand it off to Kelly.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Horst and I are thrilled to be here. Speaking in a little more detail about some of the original research that the ARF has created, as well as talking to you a little bit about some of the benefits of becoming a member of the Advertising Research Foundation. So here on your screen now, you see a slide that's called ARF Network. And one of the things that makes the ARF so unique within the industry is that our members come from multiple constituents. We have members who are advertisers and agencies and media companies, research suppliers, ad tech consultancies, even some academic organizations. We have about 16,000 members across roughly 425 member companies who are currently members of the ARF. And we would love to have you join as well. You can see some of the companies within the media constituent will look familiar to you as well. Okay? Great. So now I'm going to hand it over to Horst to talk a little bit about the mission statement for the ARF, and then also talk about some of the research that the ARF has conducted.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly and Scott. So I'm Horst, and I'm pleased to be here and tell you a little bit more about what the ARF is all about. And you see on the slide here our mission: to further, through research, the scientific practice of advertising and marketing. So what does that mean? We conduct original and curated research on the most important topics facing our members and our industry. And our mantra is that this research and the consultation that we do with our members should be objective and independent. And our goal is always to provide insights that help make advertising and marketing more effective. And that really is the story behind the study that I want to talk to you about. And in the time that we have, I'm really going to give you just sort of some headlines and a summary, and there's much, much more. But the project is called How Advertising Works. And it started in 2014 when members asked the ARF to revisit the fundamental questions about how advertising works today in light of all the changes in media and in consumer behavior. And a special focus, of course, is the multi-platform media use and the multi-platform advertising strategies. So based on this input, we decided to do this study, which was really a major project between 2015 and 2017. And we were able to do that with support from our members. In total, I think it was a $1 million investment. And we're very, very happy for all the support that we got from our members, because we think that we really did something extraordinary and came up with some insights that are really, really useful and important. Now, because of the success of this project, we did some original research after that, and it's still an ongoing project. And again, we are always trying to address important industry issues, and you can imagine there are always new issues that come about, and so we focus on those. But going back now to the fundamental research that I just introduced to you, a little bit more detail. We were focusing on conducting analyses of advertiser strategies and the return on investment. And you see some of the companies listed here that were involved. They analyzed over 12 years of data for us. The data that they looked at represented $375 billion in marketing spend. So we really looked everywhere. And you see there were over 5,000 campaigns analyzed. A lot of the research was international, not just the US. And we looked at over 100 categories. And in addition to those meta-analyses of what advertisers were doing during this time period, we also conducted 3 original research experiments that I will talk about in a few minutes, using neuroscience to get a little bit deeper into what the findings meant and how they came about. So, with that introduction, we're coming to, well, I think one of the most important slides in this presentation. I'm going to spend a few minutes on those, and you can tell from the headline here that this is a money slide, right? So this is really all about how advertising works, and the big insight here really is this was the first time ever that we had this insight that if you're on more platforms, advertising delivers more return on investment. Now, before we discuss the findings any further, let's go to the fine print here. Analytic Partners, one of the big marketing mix and attribution companies, did this research for us. They did this analysis for this project, specifically for this project, looked at over 3,000 campaigns from the time period 2010 to 2015. And now this is important for you guys. What are the platforms that they looked at? Well, they looked at TV, print, radio, display, paid search, online video, PR, out-of-home, and cinema. So in other words, they looked at all these different media and analyzed the campaigns to, in terms of the number of platforms that they used. So let me be right up front. We did not isolate out-of-home. And it was not the purpose of looking at specific media here in order to, isolate, or it was not the purpose of the research to document that a specific medium works, but the focus really was on addressing and analyzing what most advertisers do, which is they're on multiple platforms, or some advertisers at that time anyway, who are maybe only on one platform and compare. And of course, you see the findings here, very, very clear. If you add platforms, your return on investment increases. So this is a really important fundamental insight. And as I said, while we didn't break out-of-home separately, and I'll talk a little bit more about the reasons here, out-of-home was part of this. So out-of-home data are in here, and out-of-home is part of the media mix that leads to higher ROI. And I think that's a really important statement that came out of the study.
But just as I'm switching the slide, it sounds like you didn't call out any specific media. It was just looked at in general and as a whole, right?
We did some additional. We did look at one specific element, which is to look at TV versus digital, and to kind of show that adding digital does in fact, increase that, because that was one of the major questions. But what I think is important to realize when you look at data like this, these data mirror what advertisers were doing and how advertising works. So the actual impact of any specific campaign and any specific strategy, of course, depends on many, many factors. So we did some analyses, and there's, of course, a big, big body of research. The one key question, of course, is do you get incremental reach among targets? So one of the things that drives this increase in ROI, of course, is that if you are on several platforms, you do reach some additional consumers. But there's some other things going on that I'll talk about in just a minute, which probably are even more important, which you often don't realize. So the second element, of course, is the strategy. What is the right frequency? Was there appropriate good consumer targeting? And there are also some differences by category in terms of the purchase cycle. And then, of course, the various brands operate differently. There are differences between how new brands operate and older brands operate. And then finally, and we're using bold here and the explanation mark for a reason, are the creative quality. There is tons of research that suggests that between 65 and 80% of ROI is really due to the creative quality. So that really, really, really is important. So that then answers, I think, the question, why do we break down these individual media? Because this is really about general strategy, exactly how well the out-of-home campaign works, and how much impact you add by adding out-of-home to the media mix really depends on all these factors. That you have the right target, you have a really, really good creative. And that gets us to the second part of this presentation. So now that we know that multiple platforms can generate more ROI, the question is, how do we do that? And how do these effects come about? So in pursuing that, we really wanted to focus on creative strategy. And we conducted some original neuroscience-based experiments in order to explore how ads on these different platforms interact. And here's sort of the headline. The studies really show that brands are built in the brain. It's really how your brain operates and how your brain responds to the various advertising stimuli. And the key finding here is that the ads on different platforms can reinforce each other, that you get synergy effects if you have a strategy where your campaign is on different platforms. So, for example, a platform that includes out-of-home. And those campaigns tend to be more effective than if you just put a lot of weight in just one medium. In other words, if somebody sees the same ad on TV 5 times, that is likely to be less effective than 3 TV exposure and 2 out-of-home exposures, or 2 TV exposures and 3 digital exposures, or 2 TV and a print, or a print and so on. In other words, the mix can really give you an advantage if it's done the right way. And that's what we want to talk about. What is the right way, and how does this really happen? And so I want to show you the next slide, which shows the first major insight that really helps us understand how this works, and therefore also helps us understand how to make your advertising and how to make out-of-home advertising more effective. And I'm saying that even though, unfortunately, this is not an out-of-home experiment that was done, but check this out. So using a neuroscience method in a lab, all very, very nicely controlled, we were able to do this amazing experiment where we showed people TV ads and exposed them to radio ads. And in one setting, the TV campaign and the radio campaign was like totally not coordinated. In other words, there was a TV ad for a product and there was a radio ad for the same product, but the strategies and the creative were very, very different. But in the other example, the same agencies really worked on this whole campaign and made it really fit together. And the goal was that the radio ad and the TV ad would sort of interact. There would be a synergy. They would sort of play together, and the radio would even sort of remind people of the TV ad. And so what we found was that when people were exposed to these two ads that were not coordinated, their recall of this campaign actually was reduced a little bit. However, if the same strategy was used, if the ads, if you want, interacted, if there was synergy, then the recall here measured as memory encoding increased substantially. So this illustrates this principle that I mentioned earlier, which is that if you have a multi-platform strategy and the campaign on different platforms is really coordinated, and you're using the different platforms to reach your consumer in different ways, different places, in a somewhat different way, that sort of gets the memory active and gets your brain sort of like, oh wow, yeah, right, I've seen that. Oh yeah, okay, it may be the color, it may be a sound, it may be very often it's just an image that is consistent, and therefore the recall of one advertisement and seeing the other one, they play together and increase the memory. Now, based out of that, then the headline, we need a unified strategy across platforms. That will enhance memory. That really is a good strategy. But it's not the only one. There is a second important insight. And that is that this unified strategy is not enough. You also have to customize to the platform. So just to be sure you understand me here, the strategy is about the overall strategy in this campaign in terms of people you want to reach, the messages. Creatively, you could maybe use the same slogan, the same color, the same images, and so on. However, that does not mean that you're just putting the same ads on each platform. It doesn't mean that your radio ad should simply have the sound of a TV ad. It doesn't mean that your poster should just be an exact image of let's say, a second from the TV campaign, and so on. And as this particular experiment that you see here shows, it should not be a TV ad that is shown on mobile or on other digital platforms. And since that was one of the major questions that was put towards the ARF at that time, that's what we did the study on. And what you see here is another experiment using neuroscience, specifically done for this How Advertising Works project, that shows that skin conductance, which is an indicator of you being engaged with the ad, and swallowing activity, obviously a positive response to the ad, is significantly lower if the TV ad is then shown exactly in the same way or just shortened on a different platform, in this case on mobile. And the reason these experiments were so important and these insights are so important is because, as we see on the next slide, we did an analysis of what advertisers were actually doing in 2016 at the time when this study was done. And as you see, almost half did what is not optimal strategy. They had a unified strategy, but the creative was not customized to the platform. And what was done at that time, an awful lot was the TV ads were simply shown on digital, but that is not optimal. You still see that almost 20% didn't even have a unified strategy. And that often happens when different shops develop strategy for different media, and they don't talk to each other or they don't like each other and they're competing with each other rather than working together and creating something on different platforms that really works well together. A third of the companies did do that, and they, of course, are the ones who are doing the right thing and have the best opportunity to optimize their advertising. Now, this is from 2016, and based on this research and other research that companies have done, I think things are changing. There's much more customization and much more unified strategy going on now. I think that advertisers are learning how to use the various platforms and are doing the right strategy. And the next slide shows again why that is so important. It is important not just for short-term sales, but also for the long-term impact, which typically, is a result of good branding and really getting the consumers to love your brand. And this is an analysis that was done also for this study by Milton Brown. So we see very, very consistent results here, very consistent results that show that in multi-platform strategies, it is really, really important to do optimization. And we have the summary slide here that sort of puts these three mantras out there. Number one, cross-platform outperforms single platform. And I'm not a salesperson, but if I try to put a sales hat on and imagine that I was selling out of home, I would say that these data show that if you're missing out on a platform, you may be missing out on extra benefits. You may be missing out on another unique way to reach your consumers. And if you find really good creative ways to reach a consumer in this way, that can really, really optimize and really increase the return on your investment. And you do that by coming up with a unified strategy that goes across all platforms, but then you customize to each platform. And in that customization, of course, you also have the ability to target, because you may find that one platform, let's say typically TV, has a somewhat older audience than other platforms. You can target with out-of-home specific areas, specific regions where you can reach your consumers. And if you know your consumers, you can customize to that platform based on the specific appeal that your product has for those consumers in that area. So there are a lot of opportunities there. And if you do the right thing, you're really going to increase your ad impact. So those are sort of the two big headlines from the first part of the research, namely multi-platform brings more ROI, and there are strategies that you need to follow in order to optimize your impact. Now, in the rest of the presentation, I'd like to give you a glimpse of the continuation of this project. A year later or so, again, talking to our members and listening to their concerns and their questions about how to optimize advertising, how to be more successful in today's environment, we revisit an issue that has been discussed for a long time, but have been sort of forgotten recently because of all the focus about targeting and digital media and so on. And that is the role of so-called context effects, which is the impact of the context in which an ad appears. So what do we mean by that? A TV show, the editorial content of a magazine or newspaper, or a website, the music of the radio on the radio streaming service. All of those media, the content of those media surround your advertising. That is the context in which your advertising occurs. And for out of home, that of course is the location in which the ad appears. So that is a specific context. There's a lot of research, much of it decades old, that shows that the context really has an impact. So we felt it was really good to revisit that and take a look at that. And one of the reasons this came up because there was a lot of discussion about negative context effects, especially in the context, pun intended, the context of digital. And people were worried that the ads would appear somewhere which a context which a lot of people would find objectionable. So we wanted to learn more about how context impacts ad performance. And this, on the next slide, these are sort of our big headlines here. There are two key processes that trigger this context effects and that are important to look out for. And again, there's all kinds of science behind it, and we could talk to neuroscientists, and they were teaching me all about the brain. And was trying to sort of boil this down into sort of two really, really good principles, and I think here they are. Number one is what they call attention transfer. And what that basically means is there's a lot of research that shows if you're really paying attention to content, if you're really focused on the content, then your ad is more likely to be seen. Again, the TV example would be, if you're sort of semi-asleep in front of the TV, the ad's probably not going to be seen very well. But if you really love a show and you're really paying attention, hey, you're going to be more likely to pay attention to the ad too. And the research very, very clearly shows that. And of course, the same can be true, is true for all other media. And that is number one, more attention, more impact. The second effect is more of an emotional effect, and we call it, the scientists call it priming or halo effect. And it basically means that the emotional state, how you feel when you consume content, that sort of influences how you feel about the ad. And more importantly, let's say if you're just amused about something you see, you're in a happy, giggly mood, and you see a funny ad, that sort of makes the medicine go down. In other words, the ads, which, people, let's face it, often people try to evade ad and don't pay attention to ad, but if the ad resonates with their emotional state, ads are more likely to be effective. And that also applies to out of home. And here's, I think, a very, very nice example by a company that's also an ARF member, and I think they do some very interesting work. And they do a lot of work on out of home. And here's an example of a study. They analyzed that for us, for these data for our research, and we're very pleased to be able to show you that today. And it's the relationship between an out-of-home ad and its location. And I can tell you a lot of the ads, again, this is a meta-analysis, and a lot of these ads are for food products and for restaurants. And what these data show, that, for example, ads for food that appeared closer to a shopping center or a mall got a higher positive resonance from their sample of respondents. They have this big sample of people who get little rewards, and they have a special app, and they encourage whenever they see an ad that they pay attention to, they notice an ad. Tell us, did you like it or didn't like it? And what they found was that the same ads got a more positive response when they were shown next to the supermarket or close to the supermarket. So it's a very interesting confirmation of this effect, which is that if somebody has food on their mind and you're showing something yummy, hey, they're more likely to respond. Now, it doesn't mean that if you have a really good ad and you show it, in another location, that they don't pay attention. It doesn't mean that. But what it means is you get that, what I like to call, you get that context boost. The ad works better. So location does matter. And so again, it speaks to the importance of creative. you can use all kind of wonderful creative tools in order to make your ad fit better in its environment. So I like to actually close with a picture that I took myself. And if you're not in New York, maybe you don't know about Williamsburg, but let me tell you, Williamsburg and the people in Williamsburg consider themselves the hippest, coolest, wokest people on the planet. So Williamsburg is full of street art. And now it is full of advertisements which look like street art, and you're like walking around, you see all this great art, and suddenly you realize, oh, this is an ad, but the ad really mirrors the flavor of this neighborhood. And it was very interesting for me to see that companies, do this very, very small thing, according to our research, which shows how to customize your message and your creative to this environment. So obviously, you may not think about that poster to fit into a landscape somewhere in Middle America quite in the same way. You may want to use a very, very different approach there. But in this neighborhood, I think this is just a very clever, very nice way of doing it. And I can tell you myself, we were looking to take pictures of street art, and there were a couple of instances I was fooled. I said, oh, look at that, we got to go over there, this looks great. Oh, it's an ad. Well, that's a good ad. So with that, let me summarize again. These are the three big lessons that we got out of our research. It's really, really important to take advantage of these insights because it really will make your advertising more effective. And your clients will come back and saying, hey, your campaign worked because we did the right thing. And that means unify the creative strategy and your messages across the various platforms. But at the same time, customize the creative execution. And in doing so, also take a look at the context effects. Take a look at exactly where the campaign goes. And look, we realized you can't have like 50 different executions for 50 different locations, even though that's desirable, might be desirable under certain circumstances. After all, it all costs money. But think about it. And, maybe there's something, and speak to the creative team and so on. There's something you can do and it will make advertising more effective. So with that, I want to hand it back over to Kelly, because as you will see on the next slide, as you know, as I said earlier, this $1 million research has many more facets and a lot of more information. And Kelly will tell you how to get that information, not just about the study, but about many other topics that you're interested in.
And just before Kelly finishes up, I just want to remind everybody, if you do have questions, we got a couple in, but after Kelly just talks a little bit more about the ARF, we'll have a bit of a Q&A around a lot of the insights that Horst just presented. So think about it and let us know using the question widget if you have any additional questions.
Fantastic. If we can go to the next slide. The ARF is a member-based organization, and the original research that we create and curate is one of the many benefits of membership to the ARF. The easiest way for me to describe membership is dividing into three separate pillars. The first is that, which is Discover, where we can help our members get access to information through a knowledge center we have, which has massive amounts of information that's available. And you can search for research on your own, or to make it even simpler for you, we have librarians on staff who can actually pull the research for you. So if for the Discover pillar, take a look at the vast information that we have and all the presentations that have been on our stages, all the white papers that have been submitted to the ARF, articles from the Journal of Advertising Research, all the original research that the ARF creates, as well as other industry resources are available. So that's a huge benefit. The second pillar is connecting. And the connecting pillar is really about connecting our members not only with one another, but also, but also by connecting at the events that we have as well. And the third pillar is leading, and this is giving our member base an opportunity to be on our stages. And also we include our original research within the leading pillar as well. So again, remember those three pillars: discover with the Knowledge Center, connecting with our events, and leading to be on our stages and access to our original research. So if we go on to the next slide, the ARF has many events. We have conferences, we have regional events, we have leadership lab programs. Our members tell us that it's become more and more expensive to keep all of their employees trained and up to speed because things change so quickly in our industry. So we have these leadership lab programs that take place on a quarterly basis. And as part of membership, you can send as many people as you want to attend these sessions. They're available live streamed or on demand if you're not available to come into our New York office for the training. This has really become a huge benefit for our members. We also have a Young Pro event that meets several times per year around the country. And we consider a Young Pro to be anyone who's either under the age of 30 or someone who's been in their current role for less than 5 years. And it's a wonderful opportunity for the Young Pros to be able to network and learn from industry leaders. We have a Women Analytics group that meets several times per year around the country. Also, as part of membership, we invite you to participate in multiple councils that we have. We hold a webcast just about every other Wednesday, which is an educational resource that takes place at lunch. We introduced a new salon series this year, which is a more casual, laid-back type of event. It takes place after work, and our members come into our office, they have a drink, and they socialize and network. Then we go through the event, and then there's additional cocktails at the end. But it's a wonderful, relaxed way to actually be able to connect it and learn more of what's happening within our industry. We also have a weekly email that goes out to our member base on Thursday evenings. It's called News You Can Use, and it's primarily summarizing some of the hottest topics that have happened in the industry in the past week. And then our members also get a monthly email update, primarily telling them about the events that are coming up soon. It also introduces the new members to our member base, really making sure that our members are aware how to get the most out of their membership benefits. So if we go on to the next slide, our Audience Time Science Conference, which is coming up on April 15th and 16th. And Horace, did you want to talk a little bit about Audience Time Science?
Well, thank you. I think we talked about a little bit earlier about it, and it's probably worth repeating it. If you haven't been, I think the biggest benefit you have is, apart from meeting colleagues and talking to experts and hearing new research, is to really have a better understanding about what the industry is all about and what with the various media and the various groups, what's on their minds. It helps you better understand the state of the industry, and if you want, get you competitive information with regard to how do the various media sell. What do they say about themselves? What kind of research they do? Let's be candid. Out of home is not top of mind for a lot of advertisers, and I think that the great benefit here is that, and Kelly will tell you more about this in a second, that if you're becoming involved in the ARF, it's an opportunity to get that medium on stage, to get it a better play. And this kind of conference really shows you how to do that and how to get people interested in considering your medium and understanding how it works and how it can work better.
It gives the channel another voice, another outlet to talk about it,
right.
Its benefits.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is that our conference is not primarily focused it's of course not focused on out of home,
Anyone.
but given the membership, we're really trying to deal with all media. But I think that the research and the presentations about other media can be of great value to you to better understand how advertising works and how out of home fits in.
Yeah, there really is an agenda-setting conference on audience growth and measurement. So it's a must-attend event. The agenda is actually on our website, and we'd certainly be able to, are open to fielding any questions afterwards about helping you to get registered for the event. I mean, there's speakers from Xandr and New York Times and Warner Media and CBS TV and Nielsen and Hulu, Snapchat, W2O Group, MMA, MRC, and many other organizations. So that would be a great event for all of you to attend as well. Go on to the next slide. Here is our primary event calendar. We did not put all the Wednesday webcast on here just because there was not space to fit them all on. But you can see the Audience Time Science Conference on April 15th and 16th on the bottom left-hand side, as well as the other events that the ARF has throughout the year.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And there were a couple of questions that came in, and just wanted to see if we can answer them, and maybe that'll generate a few more. So first one, it's kind of a two-part question. So going back to some of those early slides in the deck when we were just starting to present it, it said, do you have a breakout of which formats contributed the most on the ROI chart? And did you ultimately isolate all formats to see the differences?
Oh boy, format meaning we focus here on the platform. If by format we mean the ad,
I think maybe I'm guessing maybe the channel
ad format. I mean, we have done different research. For example, more recently focused on commercial length. For example, we would call that a format. Is it a 6-second ad, 15 or 30? And again, all this research confirms the point I was trying to make excuse me, the point I was trying to make when I was saying if the actual impact of a specific medium in a specific campaign depends on so many different factors that once you look at individual kind of individual campaign, all kind of things come into play. Now, with regard to formats, we have looked at like the length of commercials, and we have looked at banners versus online video and those kind of things, and we found significant differences there. In general, banners are less effective than video and so on. We have not had a chance at this point to study specific out-of-home formats. So I'm not sure whether that's a satisfactory answer. Feel free to follow up if I interpreted the word format not in the accurate way.
Okay. So one other question that came in is related to reach. So when we see reach being increased by additional platforms, are we assuming that these strategies are synergistically coordinated to help increase that reach?
Well, let me break this down. I would put it this way: using more than one platform tends to increase reach, and that, of course, is a benefit all in itself. And depending, again, on the creative and all kind of other aspect, how much of a benefit that is, kind of depends. One crucial element will be that if you increase your reach, is it the reach in the target that you want? Are you increasing reach in the right group? Are you increasing reach in the group that will, in fact, be responsive to your advertising? So reach is one issue. What we're then trying to do is focus on another issue, which is the following: that independent of reach, you can employs certain strategies that will make multi-platform advertising more effective, even if you don't increase reach. And that means the following. Assuming that you use additional platforms and you don't really reach additional people. So it just means there's more frequency. And now this is important. What the research shows is it is better to reach the same consumer on different platforms than repeatedly on the same platform. For example, let's say you reach a 5. Somebody sees the same TV ad 5 times. In general, that is likely to be less effective than if he sees a TV ad a couple of times and then maybe sees a digital ad and maybe sees a out-of-home advertisement for the same product. And what the research suggests is the reason that is so is because it diminishes wear out and it activates your brain in more complex ways, which really help the memory and really help people respond to the message. Does that help? Is that clearer?
Yeah.
So again, the reason I've been emphasizing this part is because most people, I think, most of the time have thought about multi-platform as ways to increase reach. So what we hear all the time is somebody saying, well, we're on TV and all of that, but to reach younger people, we spend a lot of money on, Facebook and social media and all of that sort of thing. It sounds fine, right? But what we found is this other insight, which is it matters how you do it. And it's also important to reach the same people several times. And if you do that in this kind of way, then that can be very beneficial.
Okay. Just a couple more questions, I think. So this one, and I've kind of heard this before, so I'll just read the question as it is. Many clients use third-party media mix modeling tools when determining their mix, right? And oftentimes, in some categories, out-of-home does not fare well in these models, and clients end up pushing, a lot of their budget, 80% is the example used here, into TV or another channel. Is there anything that can be done to make out-of-home more favorable in these models? And then I guess that's assuming that, that customized creative, like you discussed, is already used. Like,
yes.
How do they fight that battle? It sounds like that's constantly happening.
Yes. This gets back to something that Kelly was just talking about, which is all those different information sources that we have and all these events. About 3 weeks ago now, we had a conference where that focused on 2 issues. One was better measurement for various media, and the other one was attribution and marketing mix modeling.
Mm-hmm.
And we presented a really, really in-depth analysis of the marketing mix models, including a how-to and what to look out for. And 2 things stand out. One is that measurement isn't always very good. In other words, the measurement of media exposure that goes into these models isn't always optimal. And then secondly, very often creative isn't even included. And so on the one hand, we have evidence that creative is incredibly important, but then it's not part of the model. Mm-hmm. And of course, the question is, how good are the out-of-home exposure data? And if those out-of-home exposure data are not really very good, then there's, of course, a danger that out-of-home is going to be underestimated, underrepresented. So I think what's really important here is that really sophistication and education about the limits of these models and a really good understanding of what are the measures that go in there. So I think there's an opportunity here for people who are concerned about out-of-home and are in that business to really educate themselves about all of this research and all the expertise about these models, and be able to talk to their clients about the limits of these models, as well as their benefits, but then also be very, very vigilant to make sure that the measurement, that the exposure measurement that goes in there as well. And I think it would be really, really interesting, and this goes over my expertise, to take a closer look at the accuracy and the sensitivity of these models when it comes to smaller elements of the campaign. Because if you spend, let's say 60% of the money on television and 25 or 30 on digital and what have you, and then you have 3 or 4 or 5% left for some other media, that relatively small amount may then find it very, very difficult to be accurately and significantly be represented in the overall model. And so it's very important to be aware of those limitations and to watch out for those.
Yeah, and I've heard that before too, like sometimes with the smaller percentages, it's hard to kind of ensure that it's having, representing the right impact that it is of that medium.
And the other, without getting to be too researchy now, the other problem is interaction effects, because as we have shown in our research, the way the ads on the different platforms work is they interact with each other. So for example, I've been emphasizing the opportunity of having, let's say, out of home being added and have these synergy effects with another medium. Well, singling out those synergy effects from a statistical point of view and from a researchy point of view is really quite difficult. And again, it's also necessary to show that, because the biggest value of out of home, for example, may not come from the person who only sees an out-of-home ad for a product and no other advertising. And that might be incredibly rare. The benefit is likely to come from all those people who see the ad in other media, and then they also see it on an out-of-home. Okay.
Cool. I think we have time for just one more question.
Yes.
So I think you may have talked about this in the upfront, but so when you layered on each platform, the incremental lift varied, with some being higher than others. And are you able to share the specific platforms for each layer, or was it just in general, like on that slide, or
No,
were they specific?
Yeah, again, I could see why you would ask that, and it's sort of frustrating, right? But it's really about the general principles of adding platforms. And again, there's another reason. Let's say, just I don't know whether this is true or was true at all, but I'm just saying, let's imagine that a lot of people used out of home, but not really in a very, very good way. It's just they just added a second thought and didn't really spend much time on thinking about strategy and creative. As a result, this kind of study would show that out of home added very, very little. But that would not be because out of home is limited and not an important factor. It's because people weren't using it very well. So I think it actually is good and important that we don't look at these kind of data which reflect what people have done and sort of saying, oh yeah, so that's the way it is. No, that's why I was saying I really want to emphasize